looking ahead to CRISPR. He's looking ahead to gene editings. And very interesting in the book, he basically says this: we need to return to first principles, meaning like, Thomas Nagel says there's no such thing as a view from nowhere. And so like Francis Fukuyama's like, we need to go back to owning first principles and a view from somewhere, et cetera. So, but you want to say, but Francis, buddy, the whole idea of the end of history is moving beyond ideology, right? Like it's the end of first principles. It's not, we don't need to have those discussions anymore, I thought, right? And this would be a larger discussion. Basically, I think Fukuyama would reply, he would say, no, I'm not saying people in democracy don't have different first principles. I'm saying that we separate the market and ideology, and we have small government, libertarianism, et cetera, so forth, and we have the first principles over here, et cetera, so forth. Here would be a giant claim I'd have to justify. The reason why, although that is internally consistent, the mistake is believing that politics and economics can be separated. That's the libertarian dream. That's why the reason why liberalism has failed, although I actually don't think the liberalism that everyone like Nick Land or Dugan is critiquing is actually the classical Russell Kirk liberalism that I'd have. Like there's Ruskin, Murr, No Place for Grace, etc. Like there's many things here. But basically, you could say that liberalism and even modern conservatism fell into the mistake of separating politics and economics. When Marx was correct about this, it's always political economy. There is no such separation of it. Because like you can kind of say, there's a lot of people that will say, to my great sympathy, I will get to the UVA, I promise.
That's fine.
To the great.
I mean, we're talking. This is the meta reality of the university, so it's okay. I mean, we're kind of still
perfect. See, it's all actually latent in it. Fantastic. Is that basically there's this idea of I don't want anything to do with politics, and I would actually argue when Cadell's talking about the theopolitical, it's this point. Well, I don't either, but the problem is if I have a job, I'm politically involved. Like if you go to work, you're actually involved in politics. Because often when we say I'm not involved in politics, what we mean is I'm not going to bring in Trump. I'm not going to bring in abortion. I'm not going to bring in the war in Iraq. Yeah, but politics sets trade, agreements.
Commerce.
Yeah. They set commerce. They set your tax rate. They determine your property tax. They determine if there's going to be a data center nearby. This is called Planier and the Great Transformation. If you're participating in the economy, you're always already political. And the problem is, if you realize that, and you're not ready for that, then you blow up and you get the popularist backlash that we're seeing all around the world, right? So the problem is that generally conservatism fell into that. I remember, and you probably remember this as well, there was a period in the 2010s where basically everyone was like, conservatism's over and now libertarianism's going to prevail, right?
Yeah.
There was this big Ron, Paul, all of these different people. And then kind of mysteriously, now everyone laughs at libertarianism. Like it's not even
It was kind of the code for like, you were trying to, you couldn't say you were conservative. But you could get away with in saying you were libertarian. I feel like that was like that's pushing the lead, more to the center or something like that. Yep. And that's the sense of that I had. I can say that and still kind of get away with some. Well, I'm going to choose my conservative values, but I'm libertarian, and yeah, it feels like a cop out in a little ways at this point, like you're saying, the critique upon it. And so, but the other piece that you were going into with the breaks, but also just the general milieu at the time was that so going back to talk about the philosophy being kind of a given, or it being the history of philosophy or something like that, makes me think about where Jordan Peterson came into the conversation, because even in, and I'm not going to get into the details of this, but in my own life, being a part of, small institutions locally, I noticed that when they forgot why they even existed, like churches, not even really knowing why they exist, like their narrative history. And even if that's 20 years, I watched it all just kind of like, you're just kind of existing and being, driven by these, spirits or egregores or the age of that type of thing. When you detach from your myth, from your narrative, from the history, like not just a mythic history, but also like a physical history, or a remembered history of, like I said, 20 years. And it seemed like, okay, well, in the end of history, mid 90s to 2015, there was like this a great amnesia or something like, oh, well, we got to go back to first principles because we've actually forgot why we're here in a sense, and we can just put all these abstractions on top of it. The woke stuff that then got built on top of it is like kind of abstractions. Seems like, I don't know. That's what that's kind of bringing out for me in that.
I agree with all of that. And basically, again, the idea of the end of history is tied to there were all these religious wars in Europe where people fought. Then we had the Enlightenment. And basically, there's this notion that liberal democracy, the Washington Consensus, there's different ways to discuss what Francis Fukuyama was discussing. Probably neoliberalism could be a problematic term because it's often a slur, but it also does refer to a real thing, which is the Washington Consensus, and basically the idea of democracy, markets, and free markets, democratic nations, war in Iraq, blah, blah, blah kind of thing, right? In many respects, there's a sense in which, although Francis Fukuyama said history ended with the fall of the Berlin Wall, there's a way in which Iraq and the Middle East was a continuation of the logic of the Cold War, because you're trying to extend capital markets, you're trying to extend capitalism. It wasn't fighting communism, but it was actually kind of post-Cold War. The logic of it was a post-Cold War. And actually, you could argue that this would be a larger argument. You could basically say the entire 20th century is just a continuation of World War I, that it all just goes on and on. And the reason why a lot of people, the boomer is now another kind of term. You're not, that's a bad term. You're a boomer or whatever, right? There's a notion in which the boomer is a continuation of post-Cold War thinking, like the continuation of the Cold War, the shadow of Buddha, as Nietzsche may say. Just the Cold War never left us, that kind of project. And there's a lot of people who are like, but that's false. That it doesn't work that way, because the Washington Consensus makes the mistake of believing politics and economics can be separated. And when there's only ever political economy, and let me explain what I mean by that. Oh, and then of course it's wild to think that World War I made the entire world, because when you ask people what started World War I, they're like, I don't know. Guns of August. It's a mysterious sort of something just happened, and like it's like a force got out of people's control, almost like Nick Land's Techno Cthulhu kind of AI game theory stuff. That's been going on since World War I. Anyway, the reason why politics and economics cannot be separated is, and this is where the sociologists like Berger and Hunter and Philip Reif and all of these cats, they say, because, and actually James K. Smith is quite good on this in his Desiring the Kingdom, You Are What You Love. And he has that idea that when you go on to the mall, what is it doing? It's working on your habits. It's working on what you love. Like society works on your habits. Okay. So here's the issue. The kind of job you have, which is determined by what the politics allow. Like this is very important. It's really hard to start an entrepreneurship that is serving food to people. The regulations, the certification is really high. And what people don't understand is you're like, well, my job has nothing to do with politics. Yeah, but the kind of jobs you're able to do to make money are actually set by the regulatory and certification body that the politics sanction, right? And this gets into Ivan Illich, who's someone Michelle and I have taught on, and we think very highly of Ivan Illich. And he's all about this regime of certification that limits the kind of jobs you can have. And here's something very important. To limit the kind of jobs people can have is to set the kind of habits they can form, because your habits are going to be determined by what you're allowed to do. And your habits are subconscious. And here's the issue, okay? You can argue that under capitalism, you get into a habit of thinking of things in terms of quantity, exchangeability, and abstraction, right? And pragmatism. Like people could look at us right now and say, why are you doing this? You're not getting what to do it? Paid. So it's what? Irrational to do, right? And most people down the street are like, why are you reading philosophy unless you're going to get a job, get paid for it? So it's not quantifiable, right? The average person in the society, because of the economy, have been trained into habits of understanding what's worth doing and what's not worth doing by their job, which then impacts what they vote for in the political body, what issues they care about, who represents them. And then those people set terms that further sets the economic structure, and you get a feedback loop, right? And you see, that is what, and if you don't realize that, which I would argue conservatism's downfall, and I do think it's been its downfall, has been forgetting that reality, not understanding that you're always liturgical. You are always being shaped by your environments. in the very, and I'll stop here, in the very way you interpret reality. Here's the problem. Your horizon, they say, no, the name of the game is to set people free. The choices you consider to pick in your freedom is determined by the horizon you have been habituated into by your embodied everyday living that you subconsciously that you're shaped by on the subconscious level, right? And if you're not aware of that, then you're going to actually be not your own. You're not going to be your own. You're not going to form your own personhood. You are simply going to be fungible, as Marx would say, or participate in the machine. But I'll pause there.